By way of introducing this topic, I would like to share the abstract of a work written by Henry Kamka of University of Bia, Cameroon. And the topic, the work is Africa Must Unite, Vindicating Kwame Nkrumah and Uniting Africa Against Global Destruction. So in his abstract, he noted that over 50 years ago, the prophetic Kwame Nkrumah called for and wrote a book titled Africa Must Unite. Many self-seeking African leaders described him as a dreamer of impossibilities. A few decades after his clarion call, some European countries created the European Union, what we call EU, for their greater unity, collective benefit, and for providing global leadership. Since then, America and Asian states have also come together, challenges, of course, notwithstanding. Africa is yet to make any meaningful progress towards a union government in spite of public acknowledgement of this need by some of its leaders. The foot-dragging approach in the unification of Africa has given rise to rapid westernization in the guise of globalization to squeeze the hell out of the continent in virtually all domains of existence. So in the midst of these aggressive efforts, Nkrumah's visionary appeal is more pertinent and imperative today in the face of a weak African socio-economic and political base. The time to unite is now, and there is no excuse for continuous rhetoric. So this abstract summarizes my thought with regard to the present state of Africa vis-a-vis economics and politics. So for the sake of this presentation, I shall go about it by giving a brief account of the life and major influence of Nkrumah's nationalist consciousness. I will also briefly recap the composition of the book for the sake of better understanding. And for the sake of those who were not present at the last meeting where Father Bettin, introduced the work. I shall preview chapters 12 and 13 of the book Africa Must Unite by the Osajefo, Dr. Francis Nkrumah. Then, by way of concluding the presentation, I'll conclude with my own thought on the political and economic state of Africa. So, Nkrumah and his major influence now. Showboy, as Nkrumah was referred to, is one of the most outstanding African scholars of the 20th century, who contributed immensely to the fight against colonialism, neo-colonialism, and most importantly, he strove to achieve continental unity as a lasting remedy to Western colonial encroachments. He is no doubt a Pan-African, as he was one of the founders of the OAU and the first leader of independent Ghana. Nkrumah, the only son of his mother, who was married to a polygamous goldsmith, was born in the year 1909 in Nkrofol in the Nzima region of the southwest of the Gold Coast, present-day Ghana. He received his education in local missionary schools before attending the government training college in Accra, known as Achimota College, from 1927. So there he was trained as a teacher and was retained to teach there when he graduated in 1930. So having initially considered becoming a priest, his political zeal and consciousness drove him out of the seminary, and he traveled to the United States of America via Britain in order to get his visa. So he studied economics, sociology, and philosophy in Lincoln University, and also worked there as a political science teacher from 1935 to 1945. So with regards to his nationalist consciousness, which led to his political zeal to see Africa free and united, he had influences, of course. So, but among these influences, we are going to be talking about a particular influences, which he, in fact, spoke about one of his influences, Dr. James, the assistant vice principal of the government training college, does. To me, he seemed the most remarkable man that I have ever met, and I had the deepest affection for him. He possessed intense vitality and enthusiasm, and a most infectious laugh that seemed to bubble up from his heart. And he was a great orator. In fact, this is the one that now concerns us. It was through him that my nationalism was first aroused. So although he had always drawn inspiration and encouragement from Dr. Ajere, especially the idea that all Africans are one, he nonetheless had his reservations with Aje's idea that cooperation is possible between Black and white people on the grounds that it can only happen when the Black race is treated as equal to the white race. And according to him, he said only a free and independent people, a people with a government of their own, can claim equality, racial or otherwise, with other people. So that was about Nkrumah's influences. Nkrumah had a lot of influences, but I particularly picked this man because we are talking about, his idea on Africa must unite. So it was the vice principal of his former training college that really aroused his nationalist consciousness. So that's why I picked this particular man. So we are now going to look a brief overview of the book, Africa Must Unite. In this book, Africa Must Unite, Dr. Nkrumah traced the effects of colonialism in Africa and delineates how Africa could become economically viable by uniting efforts in communication, commerce, and industry. In fact, there was no doubt in his speech when he argued that without political integration among African states, there cannot be economic integration. So let alone progress. So a direct quote from him might suffice thus: African unity is above all a political kingdom, which can only be gained by political means. The social and economic development of Africa will come only within the political kingdom, not the other way around. So this book, this little overview of this book, this quote, it really shows us the mindset of Nkrumah and his conviction that Africa should and must unite. So for him, those days we used to say, Nkrumah used to quote that seek ye first the kingdom, the political kingdom, and every other thing will be added onto you. So having done this review of this book, we continue. We say this book is composed of 21 chapters. And these 21 chapters are centered on 4 major themes. And I did a heavy borrowing on Dr. Bettin's work, but he gave us this summary last lesson. So a panoramic reminder of African history, a description of the effect of colonization on political and economic life and society of all Africa. Then the third one is a review of the Ghanaian case. Then the fourth one is a statement of his political philosophy, which is based on the conviction that Africa and its islands must be free and united. And of course, chapters 12 and 13 that I'll be presenting tonight is thematized under the Ghanaian case, the review of Ghanaian case. And of course, regardless the fact that it's thematized under the Ghanaian case, it is also true for the whole of African countries, because our realities as Africans are, closely knitted and related. So we delve into the work properly. So we said chapter 12, and it's titled Reconstruction and Development. So in this chapter, we shall be focusing on 4 themes. And these 4 themes are: 1, the task of countries emerging from colonization in the light of industrialization. And the second theme is examination of the other forms of exploitation from the imperialists. The third one is the task ahead. And the fourth is hindrances to development. So these are the 4 themes. I thematized this whole chapter into 4 themes. So the first theme is the task of countries emerging from colonization in the light of industrialization. Everything I've written on this slide is a direct quote from the book. So once I read one, I will try to, do some kind of explanation. So the first one is that the chapter began with this phrase: states emerging from colonialism face the gigantic problem of transforming their almost purely trading and raw material producing economies into productive units capable of bearing a superstructure of modern agriculture and industry. when what Kwame Nkrumah really meant when he pointed out this statement was that, most African countries, just immediately after they gained independence, most of our economies as Africa, please, I would like to remind us, I told you that this theme is under the case of Ghana, but it's also true with regard to other African countries. So what he was really talking about here is that when most of African countries, when we gained independence, most of our economies were just raw. We were raw, and this is because most our colonial masters, they used their colonies as a source of raw material, or their relationship with their colonies were kind of exploitative, whereby they see their colonies as the providers or producers of raw material, as Dr. Bertin rightly pointed out in his last lecture. So the task ahead of us, according to Nkrumah, is how can we convert our purely raw material state economy into an economy that will be productive? Because his idea or his agenda was to see how Africa can become economically viable, or how we can reconstruct Africa so that we no longer depend on our former colonial masters. So for him, the task ahead now is how we can convert our economy that's in the state of raw material, how we can convert them into an economy that can produce, capable of bearing a superstructure of modern agriculture and industry as the African countries had hoped. And also, according to him, this situation is relevant, or it's the same among other African countries, because we are short of personnel, as we shall see when we proceed with this topic. We are short of personnel. We don't have personnel. We don't have the literate population capable of handling this new reality of independence. So that is the challenge of the task ahead of this country. Then the second point is every advance in method of production made by the foremost industrialized countries increases the gap between them and us. So there's a theory that the countries which appear last upon the industrial scene can automatically start at the latest point of development reached by the most advanced. So this theory can only be applicable where the accumulation of capital is great enough to make an effect take off possible. In this situation now, the theory is that, okay, since the Africans are newly, started gaining their independence, so they could just key into the development that had already been traced out by the former developed country. But according to Nkrumah, it's not possible, because these African countries that just gained independence, they were not availed the opportunity they don't have enough capital to take off, because according to him, when they assume power, but he is giving the example of Ghana, when they assume power, they realized that the state house that they entered, it was cleared, and it was as if the colonial masters were never there. So they had to start afresh. So catching up with the already developed country, already industrialized country, proved difficult. So it's not with regard to the theory that say that, okay, since they just gained their independence, they should just catch up with the already developed country with the technologies that are already available. Then the third point under this theme he raises that there must also be available a literate population able to provide sufficient body of trained labor and managers to head and man the evolving industrial machine. So this is where the challenge comes in, that these African countries, they just gained independence, and it dawned on them that as much as they were clamoring for independence, but when the independence came, they came face to the reality. They discovered that we don't have enough personnel, we don't have trained personnel, we don't have enough literate population to man these key positions amid the evolving industrialized world. So these were the task ahead of this new country that just gained independence. So the second theme we'll be discussing is the second one, examination of other forms of exploitation from the imperialists. And I would like to note at once that these themes, they are linked. So they are not separate from each other. So for the examination of the other exploitative way from the imperialists, he said, due to our lack of qualified local personnel, it is these same imperialist power who are reaping another harvest today by providing the machineries, the equipment, management, consultants, and personnel, which are the requisite for our reconstruction. So you see, like I pointed out that, the ambience during the pre-independence era was freedom, freedom, freedom. But it was as if the freedom fighters, they didn't plan for the post-independent, for the post-colonial era, that once they gain independence, what next? Are we to prepare personnel? We are supposed to prepare personnel to man key areas. But when they gain independence, it dawned on them that they lack personnel. And with this, the former colonial masters, it presented to them an opportunity to further exploit Africa, since they had one providing us with machineries, equipment, management, consultants, and personnel, which are, of course, the requisite for reconstruction of the newly gained independent states. Then the second one is capital investment too. We have to seek abroad. They have not been developed in Africa. Even that bourgeoisie accumulation of wealth based upon landholding, trade, commerce, and industry. This, I think, can be attributed in a measure to the fact that the British banking firms which operated here were essentially banks of exchange and looked unfavorably upon dispensing a credit to African entrepreneurs. Of course, this is very relevant. In fact, Bertin mentioned it in his last lecture, because during the experiences of the colonial era, there were some places where white people could enter and black people could not enter. So this was also the case with regard to funds and capital investment. The white or foreign investors were considered favorably, while the local investors were not given the same. They were not given the same opportunity, and this affected these newly independent states when they gain independence. And of course, when we go further, we shall see the reason also why I wouldn't want to blame only the Westerners for this, the Africans not considered favorable with regard to dispensing of credit and to the African entrepreneurs. The third point here is one of the worst things that can happen to less developed and emerging country is to receive foreign aid with capital and economic strings attached. These aids are very often wrapped up in financial terms that are not easily discernible. In other words, the problem is how to obtain capital investment and still keep it under sufficient control to prevent undue exploitation, and how to preserve integrity and sovereignty without crippling economic or political ties with any country, block, or system. This for me is the most important part, and for Nkrumah, he would term it as a new strategy of colonization, which he termed neo-colonialism. And for this one, it is very relevant even in our today world, because this immediately after independence, our leaders, they inherited the political system of their colonial masters, and to their realization that this political system was very expensive to run. And since it was very expensive to run, and they didn't have the capital that required running this political system, so they quickly realized that they still need to fall back to these colonial powers. And these colonial powers, they now use this means of the aids they are giving to this newly colonized country as a way of still furthering their agenda, which was not very favorable. So according to Nkrumah, he was looking at how can we avoid, because for him it's a paradox. First, these newly independent states, they need loans, they need aids, and yet they also want to be independent. And these countries giving them loans, they are attaching some strings to the loans, and yet you want to be free. Yet you want loan, but yet you don't want to sever ties with the countries or blocks that could give you loan. So it is very it's a dire situation. And according to him, he said these aids are very often wrapped up in financial terms that are not easily discernible. So the third point here under this theme, we said the task ahead. So with all these experiences, what is the task ahead? One, he said, we have had enough of European monopoly domination of our economy. So we have emancipated ourselves politically, and we have now to shake off the economic monopoly that was the objective of foreign political control. This is the cross of our economic policy and the essential heart of our endeavors. For unless we attain economic freedom, our struggle for independence would have been in vain, and our plans for social and cultural advancement frustrated. So from Nkrumah, going through this book again, I don't know, it makes me realize that Nkrumah has always been prophetic, because as at when he wrote this book in 1963, he foresaw the future. He foresaw what would be, because for him, he said, now this is our situation. So what can we do? Now he's looking at, challenging the monopoly, European monopoly of economics. So how can we do it? How can we do that? Because, and he was very clear from the onset that political freedom means nothing if we are not economically viable, because it is through this economic viability that these Europeans or these imperialists come to further their agenda, which he termed as neocolonialism. Then the second point here is that a country's capital is, of course, also to be found in its body of technical, scientific, and managerial knowledge, as well as in its productive capacity. In this field, we have to acknowledge deficiency, which we know it will take time to wipe out. Moreover, the low rate of productivity makes our labor, in spite of the relatively small wages it receives, quite expensive. One thing I really, really appreciate Nkrumah about is that, he acknowledged the deficiencies of this newly independent African state, because we can't compete with the imperialists with regard to technical knowability or managerial skill. So it is a deficiency. But what is the task ahead? The task ahead is how to build our people, in order to produce in large capacity. So if we are able to produce in large capacity, then the product we are getting will not be expensive to us, regardless of the minimum wages they are paying workers. So for him, he was as clear as he was as eloquent when he was, dishing out his thoughts with regard to how this newly independent states can forge ahead. Then the third point under this page is that at the same time, we are trying to eliminate, by party discipline and other means, wide gaps between the lower and higher income groups. We are setting our hands as firmly as we can against the growth of privileged section. This plate is very, very important. You see, as at that time, Nkrumah had already foresaw it that this would happen. In fact, I did some work during my final year of philosophy on Pan-Africanism, and I came across this thought that he just immediately after most of the most African states gained independence, they realized that this political system they inherited were cumbersome and expensive to run. Instead of them to think of way to forge ahead, they fall back to they became tyrants, or they became imperialists to their own people by looting, the formation of gangs start to set in. And this is what Nkrumah is talking about, that he's giving an example of Ghanaian situation, that that's their government is trying to maximize this gap between the higher earning group and the lower earning group. And this, it's still prevalent in Africa today, in Nigeria today. You see these sets, cabals and cartels, and this is working to the impoverishment of our government, is impoverishment of African states. So finally, under chapter 12, the theme is hindrances to development. So in a less developed society, there are several impediments to industrialization, quite apart from the lack of requisite capital accumulations, technical skills, scientific knowledge, and industrial enterprise, which, unless they are eliminated, we stultify our effort at advancement. So this is the fourth theme. The fourth theme. Please, who is changing the slide? Please, can you change the fourth theme? So the fourth theme, we're talking about the hindrances to development. Now it's talking about, since we are still less developed society, so there are several impediments, according to him, that hinders industrialization, quite apart from the lack of requisite capital accumulation, technical skills, scientific knowledge, and industrial enterprise, which, unless they are eliminated, will stultify our effort at advancement. So Nkrumah was very clear that since we don't have this technical knowability, we don't have this scientific knowledge, we have not really become industrially enterprised. So they will continue to be hindrances to the development of Africa. Another hindrance he pointed out was, he talked about customs, which extol the virtues of extended family allegiance, sustain nepotic practices, and regard the giving and taking of presents as implicit and noble, because they promote the family welfare. They encourage indolence and bribery. They act as a brake upon ability. They discourage that deeper sense of individual responsibility, which must be ready in a period of active reconstruction to accept obligation and fulfill trust. Above all, they retard productivity and oppose savings, the crucial factors in the rate of development. For Nkrumah, he is looking at the case of Ghana, and for him, he said there are some custom, of course, even in Nigeria, that like I said earlier, that Africans, we are closely knitted and related. So the case of Ghana might also imply in other African states. So he was talking about our customs as one of the hindrances to their development as at then. And this custom we're talking about, the custom of extended family. So with this extended family, we pay a lot of allegiance to this extended family. And since we pay allegiance and our culture, accept the giving of gifts as present. And these gifts are implicit way of promoting family welfare. And since this is the case, there will always be nepotism. There will always be nepotism. And that is what, in fact, the late Professor Chino Achebe would term as social injustice. For instance, giving an example, A has the capability of doing a work, why B is not qualified for a work, but B has ties with the present government or the person that is to give the contract. So A, regardless of how qualified A is, A does not get the contract, but B gets the contract because B has ties with the government, and yet B is not competent enough. And at the end, A does not get the job, B gets the job, and B messes up the job. And at the end, you see, this social injustice is not only to A who lost the job, yet he was competent, but it's also to the whole country, because the whole country is now suffering for the incapability or incompetence of B, who got the job because he has ties with the government. So this is also hindrance to development, and it still happen. It still happen in Africa today. Then the third point here is that some of our traditions were hindrance to development. For example, the land tenure system. Lands in Ghana, according to Nkrumah, in theory belongs to stools headed by the chiefs. So it becomes increasingly clear that the system is too cumbersome and complex to adjust to the needs and pace of development. Now, what he is talking about with regard to this land tenure system in Ghana was that lands generally in Ghana does not belong to individual. It belongs to either family or stools, and these stools are being headed by chiefs. So this also contributed to affect our young African entrepreneurs for not getting loans or loans for capital investments. And Nkrumah pointed out, because they were not able to use land as collaterals, as opposed to their European counterparts that were giving lands when they came to Africa by chiefs, because they were giving incentive. They were giving the chiefs money. They were giving them dry gin. They were giving them mirror. So a chief can sell a land because he wants to get mirror or he gets dry gin. So, and this their European counterparts, so they have what they can use as collateral in order to obtain loans from this exchange bank, as opposed to the African counterparts that were not able to acquire land because land were not personal, they belongs to stools, and these two were headed by chiefs. So these are also hindrances to development, and Nkrumah termed it as being, it's cumbersome and complex, and it needs to be adjusted in order to fall in line with the pace of development that he and his government had wanted to achieve. So with this, we come to the end of the chapter 12. So coming to chapter 13. Chapter 13 talks about towards economic independence. Chapter 13, towards economic independence. Please, who is changing the slide? Can you please change the slide? Chapter 13. Yes, chapter 13 of our presentation is towards economic independence. As we did with chapter 12, in this chapter, we shall also be focusing on two themes. And the two themes we'll be focusing on what consists in state building, because we are looking at economic independence. So for us to gain economic independence, we have to do what is called state building. So what consists in state building? And the second theme is towards economic independence. So we go to the first theme of chapter 13. The first theme of chapter 13, what consists in state building? According to Nkrumah, the pre-independence slogan of self-government now was replaced with that of Save Ghana Now. We had held out on no glowing hopes of wealth without labor. On the contrary, we stressed the need for everyone to work doubly hard now that we were laboring for ourselves and our children, and not for the enrichment of the former colonial power. The reward would be national and individual dignity, the satisfaction which comes from creation and raised standard of life. Foremost of all would be economic independence, without which our political independence would be valueless. So Nkrumah, for him, what consists in state building is for us not to relent. Because according to him, when they were fighting this during the pre-independence time, when they were fighting for independence, their slogan was self-government, self-government. And when they gained this independence, there was a kind of feelings of, okay, since we have achieved what we wanted to achieve, we can now relax a little bit, and this could affect the development or the economic independence of Ghana or Africa, as the case may be. So for him, he said that we are quite aware that we cannot acquire wealth without working. So for us to gain economic independence, we have to double our effort. If we can be working without gaining, because during the pre-independence era, we were working, we were making all our effort, and all our effort were for the imperialists. Now that we are self-reliant, or we self-govern ourselves, so we should double our effort with regard to the effort we were putting in during the pre-independence era. We should double those efforts in order to achieve our aim. And for him, the reward would be national and individual dignity, the satisfaction which comes from creation and raised standard of life. Foremost of all would be economic independence, without which he was very clear that without this economic independence, our political independence would be valueless. Then the second point under this state building is, he said, once political independence has been achieved, the country's full potentiality can and must be explored. The domestic economy must be planned to promote the interests of its own nationals, and new and wider economic links must be created with other countries. Of course, there's no country is an island of its own. Like we pointed out at the beginning of this chapter 12, that our economies were at the state of raw material. And if our economies were still at the state of this raw material, which means we need help from other countries. So for him, he's talking about coming to our full potentialities and making ties, or diversifying our efforts to make ties with other countries apart from our colonial masters. So there's need to make new allegiance, to form new allegiances. So that's what he is really talking about here. But for us to be to gain our political independence does not mean that we are an island on our own. We need other allegiances. So that is what he is talking about in order for state building. Then the third point here, he said about the report of the United Kingdom Trade and the Industrial Mission to Ghana, published in 1959, that is about 2 years after Ghana gained independence, showed that 85% of all Ghana's import trade was in the hands of European firms, mainly British, 10% in the hands of Asians, Indians, Syrians, and Lebanese, and only 5% in Ghanaian hands. Now, many Ghanaians are participating fully in the import and export of business in the country. So this is just the summary of it. So in order for an effective state building, we must also rely on our local, or we must empower our local entrepreneurs, so that we might also involve in importation and exportation, apart from importation and exportation, in the state building, or in the affairs of the country as a whole, both business, education, nation building, and others. So there must be a need to involve the local nationals, not being too much reliant on the West, because once we become too much reliant on the West, they will continue this exploitation by means of neo-colonization, that which we have pointed out in chapter 12, when he said that one of the the tax ahead, that because we don't have personnel, so we still fall back to them for consultants, management, technical knowability, and others. So for him, there's a need to involve the nationals in the nation building. So this is what he talked about, nation state building. Then the second theme is much more longer. The second theme we talk about towards economic independence. Towards economic independence. Now, the second theme under chapter 13, towards economic independence. Now, according to Nkrumah, In planning national development, the constant fundamental guide is the need for economic independence. This involves a stock taking of the national resources, both actual and potential, human as well as material, and the need to develop them by means of careful priorities and skillful integration so as to produce a strong, healthy, and balanced economy. So Nkrumah, for me, Nkrumah has always been very clear, and as clear as he was also very eloquent in, in proposing his ideology with regard to the development and the unification of African states. So, and one of this point with regard to economic independence was that we must take stock, because for you to think of, developing yourself, you must have to take stock of what you can do. If I want to learn something, I will have to ask myself or question myself or examine myself, am I able to do this? So for him, it's important to take stock of what we have, and this stock of what we have will after be either the actual what we can do actually, or our potentiality. One, it can also be the human and natural and material resources and the need to develop those people. So once we take stock, there's also a need for development of these people in order to do what? To gain economic independence. So the second point under this thing is an important essential is to reduce our colonial produced economic vulnerability by lessening the dependence on monocropping farming. Although cocoa still remain our main export, we have succeeded to some extent in diversifying our agriculture. We plan to relate our agricultural production primarily to the needs of domestic market and to provide raw material for secondary industry. So you see, according to Nkrumah, when he talked about this, the end product is not just for exportation. We shall see it as before that. The main objective should not be for exportation. The main objective for developing the country itself. Because if we only think of exportation only, we have similar African countries. Like I pointed out that most of the African countries, our realities are similar. And if our realities are similar, which means as we are thinking of, diversifying in our agricultural product because of the end point of exportation, other African countries are also thinking about that. And if other African countries are thinking about that, at one point in time, we might end up flooding the market with enough of product. And if enough of product is in the market, there will be a kind of deflation in the prices, since we are not yet we are not the ones setting the bargaining. We don't have the bargaining power, regardless the fact that we are producers of the raw material. So this is what Nkrumah is referring to. Another point for this towards this economic independence is that Nkrumah pointed out of diversity in agriculture. According to him, diversity in agriculture has been accepted as a shallow birth. But it is, if the development is simply towards the end of exportation, this can defeat the aim, since the fact that so many countries are now concentrating upon similar objectives, so can produce an overextension of the seller's market with subsequent depression of world prices. So Nkrumah was very clear. Please, can we change the slide? If you can hear me, let's change the slide. So for Nkrumah, as much as we are diversifying our agricultural products, or we are diversifying our exportable product, the end point should not be for exportation alone. Because according to him, that if we concentrate on only exportation, then at the point in time we overflow the market, and once we overflow the market, the prices will be depressed. And once the prices are depressed, then we stand to lose. So another point under this towards economic independence will be, according to Nkrumah, that the fall in world prices of raw materials since the end of Second World War has deprived the less developed countries of the staggering sum of about 500 million pounds, an amount even greater than the so-called aid which these countries have received from the advanced nation. So this in itself represents a denial of tremendous capital from which wanted development that would not have happened had we, he is referring to the African country, had we newly emergent states been united and strong enough to make our bargaining on the international commodity market. So Nkrumah has said it all. For him, over-reliant on only exploitation without developing our various independent African states would lead to what we call the fall in prices of raw material. And he gave instance during the Second World War affected the prices of raw materials. And these prices of raw material that was affected, African countries that were exporting only raw material, they lost about 574 million euros. And this 574 million euros, according to Nkrumah, is even greater than the amount that these African countries has received as foreign aid. So if just a fall in price of our raw material, we are able to lose amount that is greater than the aid we have received, then why don't we build our nation? Because why don't we build our nation by uniting our efforts economically? That's what Nkrumah is also trying to point out. Though he was still giving an instance of Ghanaian case, but he's also reminding us that there's need to unite our effort economically in order for us to set price. And to this end, a Swedish economist, Gunnar Myrdal, is an economist and a sociologist who was awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics in 1974, noted with what Nkrumah said that underdeveloped countries utilizing their newly won independent status can make purposive policy interference manage to alter considerably the direction of the market processes under the impact of which they have hitherto remained backward. So for him, this economist that received a Nobel Prize, which means he had really contributed to economics. For him to have said that these underdeveloped countries, this newly independent country, if they unite their effort, they can actually interfere or alter the price. They can actually command or gain the bargaining power in the world market. And if they are able to do that, then they will be major player in the economy market. But we have failed, or we have continuously failed to do that, because we are interested, or we are only interested in our own personal gains. That's when I mean our own personal gain, our individual country's personal gain. And as such, we are not not united with regard to thought and with regard to our bargaining power. So since we are not united in our bargaining power, we are easily manipulated by the imperialist West. So another point Nkrumah pointed out here is that the government has to take the place of the adventurous entrepreneur who created the capital basis of industrialization in the advanced country. So therefore, capital projects such as the Volta Region Scheme and the Tema Harbor and its extension will provide opportunities for our people to develop skills at all levels. An essential element in our industrial development must be the building up of our store of technical and managerial knowledge. So please, I will keep reminding us that these chapters I'm presenting fall under the case of Ghanaian. So if I'm referring to, like, for instance, the Volta River Scheme or Tema Harbor and its extension, you know that Nkrumah was referring to Ghanaian case, and which is also true for the whole of Africa. So for him, for us to be economically independent, there is need for us to create a lot of capital projects. And this capital project, and according to him, he pointed out the Volta River Scheme, the harbors for the Tema Harbor and other nations. And also we must build our storage of technical and managerial knowledge. So he was very clear in this effort. So another point he gave with regard to this economic independence, he said that we are encouraging foreign investment. So as much as we are encouraging foreign investment, we must accept it. We must not accept it merely for the purpose of widening our industrial basis, but we must accept it because we want it to strengthen our own skills and technique. We will live if we don't assess this foreign investment with the purpose of widening our own knowledge skill, then we will fall back to the former pre-colonial era, the pre-independent era. And he pointed out, I said, we are encouraging foreign investment, but to accept it merely for the purpose of widening our industrial base without strengthening our own skills and technique will leave us as economically impoverished as we were under colonialism. Unless our nationals are given the opportunity to learn the job on the spot, side by side with foreign experts, we shall be as ignorantly backwards as ever. So Nkrumah was very clear. Another point he mentioned was, he said, every time we import goods that we could manufacture, if all the conditions were available, we are continuing our economic dependence and delaying our industrial growth. It is just these conditions that we are planning to provide so as to make ourselves independent of the importation of goods and foodstuff, that we can produce ourselves. These are the conditions which will assist to build up our body of knowledge, techniques, and skills to make us more self-confident and self-sufficient to push towards our economic independence. So for Nkrumah, he said, like I pointed out earlier, that our aim of diversifying our agricultural products should not be just for exportation. There is need for us to start manufacturing our own goods. And according to Nkrumah, when we keep importing goods that we could produce in our own country, then we are continuing, we continue the agenda of the imperialists. So for Nkrumah, he said it was imperative. He said we must keep producing products. Even if we have enough of those products imported in the country, we must produce our own. We must not look at the price of production, but we must produce, because as much as we produce, we are also showing that we are capable of running our own country. Then another point with regard to this economic independence, Nkrumah noted that we are at present planning to chart routes which will connect up the more important cities and towns of Africa. One of the factors making contact between Africans difficult is the absence of proper and plentiful means of communication. At present, according to Nkrumah, Africa's communication look outwards and not inwards. They connect us rather with countries overseas than with ourselves. And he gave instance of shipping. He said shipping is not planned to go all the way around the coast. Connecting road, crisscross crossing the continent are non-existent, and the established routines operated by existing international airlines are planned to serve travelers from Europe rather than Africans wishing to go from one part of this continent to another. So according to Nkrumah, now he has started giving his own political agenda or conviction. For him, he is so convinced that for us to be economically independent, there must be plan to chart routes that link various African countries. And for him, he was giving instance, immediately after colonization or immediately after the independence, he sensed that most of the airlines that were available, they were rather linking the various African countries to their colonial masters than linking them among themselves. And these were the effort of the imperialists. They don't want the African to unite. They don't want them to have this kind of synergy, because they know that once Africans or African countries rise to unite their effort, then they will become major players in the world, in the committee of countries. So this was their plan. And Nkrumah said that there's need for us to start linking, charting out routes to link up ourselves, link up within ourselves with regard to trade, road, defense, communication, and what have you. So another point he mentioned here is it starts talking about industrialization. And according to Nkrumah, he said all industry of any major economic significance require as a basic facility a large and reliable source of power. In fact, the industrialization of Britain, America, Canada, Russia, and other countries too emerged as a result of the discovery of new sources of energy. When I came across this point, I started laughing at myself. Imagine, as at 1963, when Nkrumah wrote this book, he had this vision that for us to improve with regard to industries or industrialization, we must always have reliable source of power. And I look at ourselves today, using Nigeria as a case study. In fact, if you could observe me myself presenting this topic, we don't even have light. I have to make provision to where the generator is on. So imagine if Nkrumah, as of 1963, has already, has already clear vision that for us to, for any country to have a significant economic significance that leads to industrialization, they must almost have reliable power supply, because without power, then there cannot be industry to produce. So, looking at our country today, you see that we are still jokes. We are joking. So, and according to Nkrumah, he said new nations like our own, which are determined to catch up, must have a plentiful supply of electricity if they are to achieve any large-scale industrial advance. So this basically was the justification of the Volta region project that he built. So, and with this, I come to the conclusion of the presentation of chapter 13. So I would like to conclude. So please, the person moving the slide, can you go to the conclusion, please? Because there are some thoughts I would like to share. I would like us to have a clear view of it. Please, can you go to the conclusion? So by way of concluding, I said going through this book, that is the Africa Must Unite. And of course, I must mention that it's not my first time of going through this book, since for my final year project as for the BSc, I did work on Pan-Africanism. So I went through this Africa Must Unite. Going through this book again, it further confirms my conviction about the Osagyefo, Dr. Francis Kwame Nkrumah, as being prophetic and visionary. And until the leadership of Africa become visionary, or perhaps more visionary than Nkrumah, by making efforts to unite the continent and embark on projects that can reverse the image of Africa in the Committee of Continents, the future of Africa will continue to remain blurred. I'm not cursing Africa, because I'm an African, a patriotic one. But the truth has to be said, that unless our leaders, the African leaders, unless we become visionary or more visionary than Nkrumah in our effort to unite Africa or make projects that can change the image of Africa in the Committee of Continent, the future of Africa will continue to remain blurred. In truth, borrowing the words of Professor Patrick Lumumba of Kenya in one of his speeches, when he noted that in the dining hall, three things are always available. It's either you are the guest or the waiter, or better still, the food to be consumed. Africa, by the actions of our leaders, has continuously demonstrated that she is neither the guest nor the waiter, but the food to be consumed. So this gives credence also to the posit of late Professor Chinua Achebe with regards to Nigeria, which is also true for Africa, when he noted that the trouble with Nigeria, that is Africa, is simply and squarely a failure of leadership. There is nothing basically wrong with the Nigerian character. There is nothing basically wrong with the Nigerian or African land or climate or water or air or anything else. The African problem is the unwillingness or inability of its leader to rise to the responsibility, to the challenge of personal example, which is the hallmark of true leadership. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mezier. We had wanted to do the translation, but I've seen that those who remain here, they are all English speakers. They speak both English and French. They speak English and French fluently. Hence, there will be no need for translation. We can move quickly to the issue of inputs, suggestions, things people feel like it touched them particularly, and then they would want to share. I will just say it briefly in Italian, at least let them get the gist of where we are. Dicevo che ho visto che qui c'è soltanto Bertin e Don Venance, perciò non c'è bisogno di tradurre la cosa in italiano, visto che siete già esperti in inglese, voi avete anche colto l'essenziale e ciò di cui Mezier stava parlando. Perciò adesso noi accogliamo le domande e poi alcuni inputs. Va bene, quindi diamo un pochettino di minuti per almeno connettersi bene e poi anche fare qualche suggerimento. So we wait, this is the moment for input. If someone feels like he wants to share something touched in particular, or he needed clarification of one or two thoughts, is highly welcome. We have seen Professor Sensen's comment that it's quite important, the distinction Krumah made between political independence and economic dependence. And now he's posing a critical question to Meze. He's asking, how do we promote a real economic nationalism, that is Pan-Africanism, that is totally economic based, that is an economy that is nationalist and Pan-Africanist in nature? That is his question. How do we promote such a type of economy? Emezie, this question is posed to you by Cécile Venance, Professor.
Okay, okay, thank you very much. I will do my very best to to answer it. Please feel free to contribute also if you feel you can give. So for me, according to Nkrumah, he made it clear that that without economic independence, then our political independence would have been valueless or useless, if I should use this word. And when we talk about political independence, it's just the ability of country to run the affairs of their own country. And of course, running the affairs of your own country include having say with regard to the economy and others. But how do we now promote this economic independence? Now, by promoting this economic independence, and according to Nkrumah, there's need for us to unite. Even if we are not uniting with regard to politics, or not. When talking about unification of Africa, he's not talking about giving the reins of your individual country to one person to rule. No, he's talking about with regard to economic independence. Economic independence has to be with. Let me borrow the words of this the professor, the economist I made mention. Is how we can affect, or we as African, how we can also affect the economy market or determine the price, because Africa, we are majorly the producers of raw materials, and with these raw materials that we have, we are not even the ones setting the prices for these raw materials. So how can we have a say? How can we not have a say with regard to the product we are selling? Because we are not united. And for him, we must have to be united, come together because most of the African countries, like I said, we are closely knitted, and as such, most of the produce that one country sends, or export goods one country sends out, is almost the same thing as the other export goods another country set, apart from little discrepancies. So for him, we must have to come together in order to see, okay, we have this product, then we have to come together to say, okay, how can we set the price? Let us be the one that have the bargaining power for this raw material we have. This is also one way. And another way also, we have to look at of having a, how do we call it, one currency. Look at Europe, for instance. You look at Europe, for instance. Though many of the European countries, they still have their own currency. For instance, Swedish have their own kronka and others, but they still have euro. And with this one currency they have, it is easy to support each of the European countries, to support each other's economy, since we don't need to go through the stress of still changing money to when I imagine if I'm in Nigeria going to Ghana, when I reach Ghana, I have to change to Ghana city, and I go to Cameroon, I have to change to France. I go to this country, I have to change, and since I keep changing, then our currency won't have the value in the world market, because our currency is not used in purchasing in goods, purchasing of goods and services in the world. So if, for instance, if Africans, we have one currency, so it's easier for you to purchase our raw material. You have to purchase our raw material in our own currency as African, at the African currency. So this is another way of promoting economic independence. And also another way of promoting economic independence is also, according to Nkrumah, invest more in our technical knowability, invest more in local products, industrialization. And if you're able to industrialize, we import less. We import less goods we can produce while importing them. So we import less. Once we import less, then our industrial base will be strong. So we are able to export more, and exporting more, we are exporting, but having the bargaining power and having the purchasing currency. These are also ways of getting economic independence. So if there is other people that want to contribute, their contributions are welcome.
Thank you so much, Mezier, for this, your beautiful presentation. I would like to also commend you for the passion and the way you did justice to the thoughts of Kwame Nkrumah on economic independence, and then on the way you coined it, making a lot of differences, and showing how Africa can move forward only when she achieves this economic independence. And then that we can only build the Africa that we so much desire. When you're even talking about the uses of lights infrastructure we see in different parts of Africa, especially in Nigeria, as things that actually calls us to reevaluate the choices we make in Africa at large. Thank you so much for your passionate presentation. We still have at least 2-3 minutes for more inputs, for whoever wants to add in or chip in something or ask questions. To you, I give the words.
So I want to thank Mezier, and would like to ask that final question if there's no other question concerning this topic that was well presented by Nwachukwu Chimezie. That what's on a personal note, what did you take from this? What did you arrive at studying this book of Nkrumah, Africa Must Unite? These 2 chapters, chapter 12 and chapter 13. So, on a personal note, what did you come out? What did you come out with? What was your personal take home, if I would say, from this?
Okay, thank you very much. For me, not just from these 2 chapters, but since I presented these 2 chapters, for me, I wouldn't say I became more angry. I wouldn't want to say that, but in truth, I became more angry with the situation of Africa after going through this chapter. Because for me, as I'm reading it, I'm trying to juxtapose it with our present day Africa, and also comparing the time this book was written. And you see, as at when it was written, 1963, I don't know if my parents were born then, but you can imagine Nkrumah was as clear as he was as at then. If we could follow this, what could have happened to Africa? And the question that keep battling me is, where did we get it wrong? Where did we get it wrong? If Nkrumah had this kind of beautiful ideas during immediately after the independence, that this must have to happen for us to develop. And if you look at these ideas of it, we see that these ideas, they were not euphoric, they were not idealistic, they were practical ideas. that for you to, for example, for us to be industrialized, we must have reliable power source. It is reasonable and it is practical. So with all this, example, and he was not saying that, he was saying it and he was giving practical examples. So the question that in my own was not thought, my own was question that came up to me. Where did we get it wrong? And for me to answer this question, I will still fall back to the question, to the opposite of Chinwe Achebe, when he said that the problem with Nigeria, as if he was talking to Africa, the problem with Africa is not the problem of our land or our condition, it's the problem of leadership. And until this, our problem of leadership, that includes myself because I'm an African. So until this problem of leadership is solved, we stop this paddy leadership, that's nepotism, social injustices. If A is more qualified, even if A is my family member and A is more qualified to do this job, why don't I give it to A so that A will do this job properly? So until we stop this paddy or partisan party playing, I think we will still continue to be in this kind of quagmire. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mezier. Really, you did so well, and we are all very much impressed. Thanks for your beautiful presentation. In the absence of any other thing, we are going to draw the curtain now, unless someone wants to add one or two things, but it's just fast velocemente, just very fast, a point, and we go. Otherwise, we'll call it a night, and then we meet again in 2 weeks' time. That should be on the 16th. Okay, thank you all for this for your participation, and we are looking forward to seeing you and in numbers, just the same way we saw you tonight. Grazie mille, grazie del cuore. We thank you from the bottom of our heart. Good night to you all and sweet dreams.
Good night to you all, and also let us not forget to be sharing the link. Sharing the link. A lot of work is being done to come with this thing, like what Chimezie has just presented now. It took him time to do all those things, and it would be good that a lot of people hear these presentations, and that we're having it just 11, 12 persons is not good enough. So individually, when the link is presented, let us share it. Share it. It does not cost us much. It just costs us, if it is too much, 10 minutes to share in our different pages and what have you, so that people can, even though just share. That is it. Share it. And this wonderful talk of Mezier now, if it has gone to like 50 young people, 100 young people, yeah, we are building minds. So let it be our responsibility and commitment to start sharing these links. The YouTube link, everything that we produce, once it gets to you, share it. Share it. Because it comes to you because you like it. You want it and you listen to it. So share it to other people to gain what you're also gaining. So thank you very much, and good night to everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, General Coordinator. Ciao.
Yeah.